December 17, 1939. Late afternoon. The River Plate estuary, Uruguay. 20,000 people stand on the waterfront of Montevideo in near total silence. They have been gathering since morning. Workers, diplomats, journalists, families with children, drawn here by news of the ship. On the water, a great grey warship is moving slowly through the channel, nearly 600 feet of steel, twin 11-inch gun turrets, fore and aft. The pride of the Kriegsmarine, sailing deliberately toward the open sea. Radio correspondents are broadcasting live to audiences across the globe. This is the most watched story on Earth, and the whole world is listening. Then the charges detonate. The explosions roll across the water. Smoke and fire climb into the late afternoon sky. The warship burns. She settles into less than 25 feet of water, visible from shore, and does not disappear. She simply burns. And the 20,000 watching say almost nothing. 3 days later, the man who gave the order to destroy her was also dead. Not in battle, not on the bridge of his ship, in a hotel room in Buenos Aires, in his dress uniform, wrapped in a flag that the German government had replaced 17 years earlier. His name was Hans Langsdorff, and this is how one of Germany's finest naval officers ended up there. She was born, in a sense, as an act of defiance. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June 1919, had done its best to ensure Germany could never again project naval power. Replacement armored ships were to be limited to 10,000 tons. Small enough to threaten nothing, small enough to be no one's problem. Germany built her anyway. The Admiral Graf Spee was the last of 3 ships of the Deutschland class, what the British called pocket battleships, a name that captured something real. They were too small to be classed as true battleships, but they were more powerful and faster than most other warships afloat. Their hulls were electrically welded. Armor protection was sacrificed for speed. And crucially, their displacement ran to over 14,000 tons. 40% above the limit the treaty permitted. She was, by design, a ship that looked like one thing and was another. Her main armament was 6 11-inch guns, mounted in 2 triple turrets fore and aft. Those guns could reach out and kill at ranges beyond anything the British cruisers in the South Atlantic could answer. She could make 25 knots and range 12,000 miles without refueling. She was launched in June 1934, commissioned in January 1936, and she was exactly what Germany's Grand Admiral Erich Raeder needed when he looked at the map and thought about war. Raeder's problem was straightforward. The German fleet was hopelessly outnumbered. 3 pocket battleships, 2 battle cruisers, 8 cruisers, 57 U-boats against 23 British and French capital ships, 8 aircraft carriers, 80 cruisers. He could not win a fleet action, so he would not fight one. He would send fast, heavily armed ships to strangle Allied supply lines across the world's oceans, drawing British warships away from their normal stations, forcing the enemy thin across thousands of miles of open water. Commerce raiding, the lone wolf strategy, the Graf Spee was built for it. She was named for Admiral Maximilian von Spee, the German naval hero who, in December 1914, had taken his squadron into the South Atlantic, defeated a British squadron off Coronel, and then died 3 weeks later when the British caught him at the Falkland Islands. He went down with his ship. His fleet was destroyed almost entirely. The South Atlantic swallowed him. The ship that bore his name would sail toward those same waters 25 years later. She would not escape them either. Hans Wilhelm Langsdorff was born on March 20, 1894 in Bergen, a town on the island of Rügen, off the Baltic coast of Germany, the oldest son of a family of lawyers and clergymen, not sailors. In 1898, when he was 4 years old, his family moved to Düsseldorf. Their neighbors, on the street where he grew up, were the family of Count Maximilian von Spee. He could not have known then what that name would one day mean to him. He joined the Imperial German Navy as a young man, served in the First World War, and navigated the wreckage of defeat with the quiet discipline of someone who had decided that the sea was his vocation regardless of what governments did to each other. His administrative abilities earned him a posting to the Defense Ministry in Berlin in 1925. He was recalled to Berlin again in 1931. Good at paperwork, trusted with decisions. The career of a man whose talents keep pulling him away from where he wants to be. When the Nazis rose to power, Langsdorff requested sea duty. He was instead appointed to the Interior Ministry. In 1934, with the Nazi Party reshaping the German state, Langsdorff was filing requests for sea duty and being assigned to desk work in Berlin. He got his ship eventually. By 1936, he was serving aboard the Graf Spee. By January 1937, he was a Captain zur See. In October 1938, he received command. A fellow officer described him as having a calm and well-balanced personality, together with his keen sense of humor and his tactical and strategic training. He was not the kind of officer who gave speeches. He was the kind who knew his ship and knew his crew. His record with prisoners would prove that this was not a pose. On the evening of August 21st, 1939, on the quayside at Wilhelmshaven, 3 people stood and watched the Graf Spee prepare to sail. His wife, his 16-year-old son, Joachim, his 2-year-old daughter, Inga. At 7 o'clock, the ship sailed. Hans Langsdorff never saw his family again. For the first 3 weeks of the war, the Graf Spee hid in the open ocean east of Brazil. Hitler wanted to see how serious Britain was. When it became clear the answer was very, on September 20th, 1939, the ship was released to carry out her orders. Between September and early December, she sank 9 British merchant ships in the South Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. Not a single crew member was killed. Every sailor was transferred to the supply ship Altmark, which served as fuel depot, ammunition store, and floating prison for the men Langsdorff declined to leave in the water. He followed the rules of war. He followed them without exception. The Altmark would later be intercepted by the British destroyer HMS Cossack in a Norwegian fjord in February 1940. The prisoners were liberated. That is its own story. But the chain of consequence stretching behind the Graf Spee extended further than anyone could see. The British, meanwhile, were running. 7 Allied hunting groups, 23 major warships, including aircraft carriers and battleships, were scouring the world's oceans for a single ship. The strategy was working. The Graf Spee was costing Britain enormously in dispersed resources, not just in sunken ships. Langsdorff was doing his job. He was also following his orders to avoid superior forces. That discipline was the condition of everything. He was dangerous because he was disciplined. He was free because he was careful. On December 2nd, 1939, a British merchant ship called the Doric Star was attacked midway between Sierra Leone and the Cape of Good Hope. Before she went down, she got off a signal identifying her position and her attacker. That signal crossed a chart room in the South Atlantic, and what happened next would change everything. Commodore Henry Harwood, commanding the Royal Navy's South America Division, stands at the chart table of his flagship HMS Ajax on December 3rd, 1939. He has the Doric Star signal. He has no intelligence on the Graf Spee's heading. What he has instead is a method. He thinks through the raider's logic. A commerce raider in the South Atlantic, moving north and west from the Indian Ocean. Where does she go next? The River Plate estuary between Uruguay and Argentina is the most congested stretch of shipping lanes in that part of the world, the most valuable target available. Harwood orders his squadron to a specific grid coordinate, 32 degrees south, 47 degrees west. He is reasoning through an enemy's mind. He is right. His force, designated Force G, consists of 3 ships. The heavy cruiser HMS Exeter, under Captain F.S. Bell. 6 8-inch guns. The light cruisers HMS Ajax, Harwood's flagship under Captain C.H.L. Woodhouse, and HMNZS Achilles under Captain W.E. Perry, 8 6-inch guns each. A New Zealand crew serves aboard Achilles. They're a long way from home. On paper, this force has no business engaging a pocket battleship. The Graf Spee's 11-inch guns outrange every weapon Harwood commands. At sufficient distance, Langsdorff can sink all 3 British ships before they can strike back. The geometry of firepower is entirely against Harwood. So Harwood designs a plan to make geometry irrelevant. He splits his force. Exeter attacks from one axis. Ajax and Achilles press from another. Langsdorff must choose where to aim, and whatever he chooses, something is coming from the other direction. It is a plan that accepts damage in exchange for survival. It depends on the enemy not knowing what it's designed to do before it's already working. Force G converges on the River Plate. The Graf Spee is heading the same direction. The morning of December 13th, 1939. Clear sky. Summer in the southern hemisphere. The sun is still low when the Graf Spee's lookouts pick up smoke on the horizon, roughly 150 miles east of the River Plate estuary. They think it's a merchant convoy. They move toward it. The British cruisers, at the same moment, are trying to identify the grey shape materializing from the west. HMS Exeter is detached to get a closer look. Then the shape resolves. The silhouette of a pocket battleship, unmistakable, bearing down at speed. Both sides misread the situation at the same moment. And now the battle is coming regardless. His 11-inch guns give him range. Devastating, lethal range. At distance, Langsdorff controls this engagement entirely. Harwood's entire plan was designed to close that gap. Langsdorff closes it for him. He sees the British ships coming at him hard and fast. The kind of aggressive charge a destroyer flotilla makes, not a cruiser squadron. He misidentifies them. Later, he will explain it simply. They came at me like destroyers. And so he closes the range, surrendering the one advantage that made his ship genuinely dangerous, and turns this into a close-quarters fight. It is the decision the entire tragedy flows from. The battle begins at 6:20 in the morning. The Graf Spee opens fire on Exeter. Within minutes, the heavy cruiser is taking catastrophic punishment. Her bridge takes a direct hit. Most of her senior officers are killed or wounded. Her guns are hammered into silence one by one. 61 men die aboard Exeter in the course of the morning. She burns. She lists. Her captain, F.S. Bell, blood on the deck, surveys what remains of his bridge and makes a decision. He turns Exeter toward the Graf Spee. He's going to ram her. Harwood orders him to disengage. Bell acknowledges and peels away south toward the Falkland Islands, trailing oil and smoke. Ajax and Achilles press from the north, closing fast, harrying the pocket battleship from the other axis, exactly as Harwood intended. Langsdorff himself is rendered unconscious during the engagement by the concussive force of a hit, temporarily removed from command at the worst possible moment. At 7:25, Ajax loses her 2 after-turrets to an 11-inch round. She's fighting half-crippled, and Langsdorff has a window. Exeter is broken and heading away. Ajax is damaged. He can finish this. He does not. At 6:36, the Graf Spee turns west. She begins her retreat toward Montevideo. Harwood shadows her through the night, keeping his distance. In darkness, torpedoes would be fatal to what remains of his force. He simply follows, watches, and waits. The Graf Spee has taken multiple hits. Her galley, the kitchen that feeds over 1,000 men, is wrecked. A shell has passed through her fuel purification system. Her engines are showing fatigue. She has 36 dead, 60 wounded. She has won on points a battle that has left her unable to make it home. She needs a port. She needs somewhere to stop. The Graf Spee enters Montevideo harbor on December 13th. Uruguay is neutral. Langsdorff requests 72 hours to make repairs. The watching world descends on the city. The British naval attaché in Montevideo, Henry McCall, and an intelligence officer climb into a small boat and sail slowly around the pocket battleship. They circle her. They observe her hull. They watch her crew working normally. They see, to their considerable surprise, very little visible damage. McCall makes the logical call given what he can see. He requests that Uruguay invoke the 24-hour rule. Under international neutrality law, a warship from a belligerent nation must leave a neutral port within 24 hours or face internment. If the rule is invoked, the Graf Spee goes back to sea. 2 damaged light cruisers, no reinforcements yet, and the full firepower of the Graf Spee, repairs or not, coming out of the harbor. Directly at them, Harwood's message arrives at the attaché's office. He tells McCall that the Graf Spee remains a formidable fighting ship and that he has almost nothing to stop her with. McCall reverses course immediately. Now the British want the Graf Spee to stay in port. The goal is to hold her there while reinforcements are summoned from wherever they can be found. They came within hours of triggering their own trap too early, of sending the Graf Spee back to sea before they were ready for her, and losing whatever remained of Force G in a second engagement they could not have survived. The British nearly destroyed their own plan by the simple act of looking at a ship and not seeing enough damage. Langsdorff, inside the harbor, is working against a clock he cannot stop. December 15th. 2 days into the standoff. The Uruguayan authorities grant Langsdorff permission to bring his 36 dead ashore. A funeral procession moves through Montevideo. A German brass band, a firing party, 37 open graves at the Cementerio del Norte. Cameras are there. Diplomats are there. Intelligence officers are there. The whole world is watching this city. The cortege reaches the graveside. The Germans form up. Virtually to a man, they raise the outstretched arm, the Nazi salute, the salute of the regime, the only salute now permitted. Hans Langsdorff raises his hand in the old Imperial Navy style. Not the stiff arm extended toward the sky. The measured, closed-hand naval salute of a service that ceased to exist with the Kaiser's abdication in 1918. The gesture of a different Germany. A Germany from before. He gives no order. He makes no announcement. He offers no explanation to anyone standing beside him. He salutes his dead. No one around him appears to react. The moment passes. The dead are buried. The procession returns to the harbor. 3 days later, in a hotel room in Buenos Aires, he will say the same thing again. In private, with no cameras, wrapped in a flag. Now, what was actually waiting outside Montevideo harbor? Ajax, Achilles, both damaged, both low on ammunition. One newly arrived heavy cruiser, a HMS Cumberland, the ship that had been undergoing repairs at the Falkland Islands when the battle happened, and had raced north to join the blockade. That was the British force, 3 cruisers, 2 of them hurt, not fully capable of another full engagement without significant risk. The battleships were not there. The aircraft carrier was not there. The armada was not there. What Langsdorff believed was outside, an overwhelming force. Battleships, aircraft carriers, a cruiser squadron large enough to destroy the Graf Spee wherever she emerged. These reports were reaching him through multiple channels, from multiple directions, and they were consistent enough to seem like fact. They were not fact. They were architecture. The British had been transmitting signals in codes they knew the Germans had broken, fabricating a fleet, planting a fiction directly into the communications channels Langsdorff was reading. It was a form of deception Britain would refine over the next 6 years into an instrument that helped win the war. Here, in December 1939, it was being used in earnest for one of the first times, and it was working. But the British hadn't planned for the most effective part of the deception. That part was accidental. Montevideo's radio broadcasters were covering the most watched story on Earth: the harbor, the ship, the standoff. The world was listening, and the broadcasters needed content hour after hour to fill the airtime. And so they repeated every rumor that floated through the city, every whisper about British warships arriving, every hint of a carrier, a battleship, an overwhelming force gathering outside the harbor. The rumors were reported as though confirmed. They went out on the radio and reached every set in the world, including whatever the German naval staff was listening to. The citizens of Montevideo were doing the British Navy's work without knowing it. The whole world was amplifying the fiction. The whole world was building the walls of the trap. And then the merchant ship. On the evening of December 16th, the Uruguayan port authorities informed Langsdorff that a British merchant vessel has departed the harbor that day. Under neutrality law, a warship from a belligerent nation must wait 24 hours before following a merchant from the same nation, out of the same port. The British had timed the departure specifically. The window, already narrow, closes completely. Langsdorff's options, which were never abundant, are now essentially two: fight his way out against a force he believes will destroy him, or scuttle. Not by force, not by battle, by paperwork, by timing, by rumors on a radio, by a fog of false information that had settled over the entire harbor and that no one inside it could clear. The most powerful surface raider Germany had sent to sea was being suffocated methodically and without a single additional shot being fired, by the machinery of deception. December 16th. Evening, Langsdorff calls his officers together. He has been sending telegrams to Berlin. Berlin's position is clear and has not changed. The ship must not be interned. The options are to attack or to scuttle. He has considered Buenos Aires. Argentina is more sympathetic to Germany. But the channel may not be deep enough for the Graf Spee's draft. He cannot be certain she would make it. He has thought about running for open water at night. The merchant ship's departure has closed that window. He walks through the arithmetic. The ammunition remaining, the damage sustained. The force he believes is waiting beyond the harbor. His engines, already strained, cannot be trusted over 700 miles of contested Atlantic at speed under fire. His crew, over 1,000 men. In a letter to the German ambassador, he puts it plainly. I reached the grave decision to scuttle the Graf Spee to prevent her falling into the hands of the enemy. With the ammunition remaining, any attempt to break out to open water was bound to fail. And then, I can do no more for my ship's company. December 17th. A skeleton crew of 40 boards the Graf Spee. The rest of the men are taken off safely, transferred to vessels heading for Buenos Aires. The ship raises anchor. 20,000 people stand in silence on the waterfront. It is late afternoon. The sun is lowering over the River Plate estuary. The water is calm. The great grey warship moves slowly through the channel toward the open sea. Radio correspondents are broadcasting. Diplomats are watching. Thousands of ordinary people who came to see history are watching. The whole world, via crackling radio sets, is listening. In the channel, a private yacht called the Achernar sits at anchor. British intelligence has positioned her there with a preset color flare system to track the Graf Spee's course and relay it to the waiting ships outside, in case she tries to run. She does not run. The charges detonate. Fire climbs from the hull. The ship burns. She settles into less than 25 feet of water, close enough to shore that the crowd can feel the warmth of it. Close enough that a man with good eyesight can read the name on what remains of her bow. Outside the harbor, on the damaged deck of Ajax, Commodore Harwood watches the smoke rising. The most powerful German surface raider of the early war, which had sunk 9 merchant ships across 2 oceans without killing a single civilian sailor, sits burning in the shallow water of the River Plate estuary as thousands watch in silence. She never fired another shot. Hans Langsdorff addresses his crew in Buenos Aires on the afternoon of December 19th. He ensures they are properly interned, housed at the Immigrants' Hotel under the care of the Argentine Navy, which renders full military honors. 1,000 German sailors are alive, safe, far from the war. That night in his room, he writes a final letter. A captain, he says, cannot separate his own fate from that of his ship. He lays out a flag. Not the Nazi swastika. The battle flag of the Imperial German Navy, the Kaiserliche Marine, the fleet of Kaiser Wilhelm II, the navy of a Germany that had ceased to exist in November 1918 when Langsdorff was 24 years old. He had grown up in that navy. He had learned what it meant to serve in that navy. The merchant crews transferred unharmed, the prisoners released, the old salute at the graveside in Montevideo. Those were the values of that service. He wraps himself in the flag. He puts on his full dress uniform, and he shoots himself. He was 45 years old. He was buried at La Chacarita Cemetery in Buenos Aires. The Argentine Navy gave him full military honors. In Berlin, Hitler's reaction was fury. Langsdorff had disgraced the Kriegsmarine. He had followed international law throughout his entire war. He had released every prisoner unharmed. He had preserved more than 1,000 German lives. A disgrace. That was the verdict of the regime. The 1,000 men he saved were alive. They marched through the Argentine naval arsenal in uniform at his funeral. They went home eventually, most of them. The war continued without them for 6 more years. What was waiting outside Montevideo harbor as Langsdorff made his decision? 2 damaged light cruisers, low on ammunition, 1 heavy cruiser that had just arrived. The battleships were days away, the aircraft carrier was days away. The armada was a signal in a broken code, a rumor on a radio, a fiction that the whole world helped build without knowing it. The threat he was fleeing was, in large part, a ghost. He destroyed one of Germany's most powerful warships, and then himself, to avoid a battle he might have won. The wreck of the Admiral Graf Spee remains in the River Plate estuary today, less than 25 feet of water, a few miles from Montevideo. In 1997, one of her 15-centimeter guns was salvaged from the floor. In 2004, the rangefinder tower was brought up. In 2006, a bronze eagle, 9 feet wide, 700 pounds, salvaged from her stern, became the subject of a legal dispute between the Uruguayan government and a private businessman that has not been fully resolved. Even now, 85 years later, the Graf Spee is still causing an international argument. She was named for a man who died in these same waters a generation before her. She was commanded by a man who grew up beside that man's family. She was built to deceive. A pocket battleship disguised as a treaty ship, a weapon dressed as compliance, and she was destroyed by a deception in return, a phantom fleet that lived entirely on a radio signal and in the rumors of a city that didn't know it was fighting a war. Hans Langsdorff chose his flag when he died, not the one his country was flying. He made that choice in a hotel room in Buenos Aires, with no cameras, with no one watching, a private declaration. The salute at the graveside in Montevideo had been the public version, raised before cameras, before diplomats, before the eyes of the world. The ship has been on the floor of the estuary for 85 years. The man who sank her has been gone just as long. He chose the flag he died on,